Believe it or not, the New York State Emergency Rental Assistance Program is still not open. But I do have some news and updates that I want to share with you guys in this video coming up. Hey guys, if we're just meeting, my name is Vitaly Volpov. I'm a practicing attorney, an active real estate investor, and a part owner of a real estate brokerage in upstate New York. On this channel, I discuss relevant legal concepts as well as best strategies and tips for real estate investing and personal finance. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell so that YouTube notifies you of all my future content. If you enjoy the content in this video, hit the like button and comment down below. And as always, whenever I'm discussing legal or financial topics, just remember, nothing that I say in this video should be construed as legal or financial advice. I provide this information for educational and entertainment purposes only, and you should always consult with your own attorney and your own advisor before making any legal or financial decisions. Last but not least, the views and opinions that I share in this video are my own alone and do not necessarily reflect those of my law firm or any of my business partners. All right, so the first bit of news is that OTDA, the New York State agency, which is in charge of processing applications and ultimately providing the emergency rental assistance funding, has finally updated its website. Now, it doesn't just say that the program is opening soon, but it's actually providing us with some useful information about the program. So now we have some general information, we have information on eligibility, information on benefits, and information on how to apply. And finally, there's also a frequently asked questions section. Now, a lot of this information I covered in my previous video when the New York State law authorizing the emergency rental assistance funds first came out. So a lot of this stuff is not really new, but there are a few new things that I do want to highlight. But if you guys haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it in the description below, as well as in the YouTube card above. You guys can check that out. I go through it in pretty meticulous detail in terms of what the eligibility criteria are, what will be required, how this whole thing will work. And I'll cover some of that again here, but I'm not going to go into as much detail in this video as I did in that one. I just want to highlight the new updates and news that have come out recently. One of the big news to come out last week is that out of the 24 local governments in New York State that received direct funding from the federal government, only 7 of them decided to administer it themselves. The remainder of the local governments that received direct funding decided to allow the state to administer it for them. As I mentioned in the beginning, the state is still not telling us when this application program will become available. Currently, the website says that it will be soon. On a webinar that I attended last week provided by OTDA staff, they mentioned that it may be still weeks away. On the flip side, one of the 7 local governments that decided to keep this application process in-house is Onondaga County, and that county began accepting applications on April 19th, 2021, almost exactly a month ago, and they've been quite successful in getting through the applications. From what I'm hearing, they're actually beginning to send deposits directly to landlords. Contrast that with the state that hasn't even begun accepting applications, and who knows how long it's going to take them. I'll talk about the lengthy process that we should be expecting from the state with this emergency rental assistance program a little bit later in this video, but just know that had those local governments kept their programs in-house, their residents likely would have received the funding much sooner. So the 7 local governments that decided to keep it in-house are the city of Rochester, Monroe County, the city of Yonkers, Onondaga County, and the towns of Hempstead, Islip, and Oyster Bay. Everybody else, all the other counties, including one of my home counties here in New York, in the capital region, Albany County, and Saratoga County, decided to pass the buck off to the state to allow it to administer this program. So as we scroll down here on the state's website, we go from the overview to the eligibility section, and this didn't really change much. There's not much new information in this section. It's pretty much the same as what I covered in the prior video. In order for any tenants to qualify, they need to meet the 80% of the area median income threshold. They also need to demonstrate that on or after March 13th, 2020, a member of the household received unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in income, incurred significant costs, or experienced financial hardship directly or indirectly due to the pandemic. There are a couple of other requirements that are listed on the state's website, but for the most part, the information is the same. In terms of priority of applications, there are certain requirements that the state will be looking for, specifically that households who will receive priority in the first 30 days will need to be at or below 50% of the area median income. And they must also meet one of the criteria listed on the screen. The very last criteria listed on the screen is that the tenant lives in a dwelling of 20 or fewer units. On a webinar that I attended last week, a question was posed to the presenters about what happens to landlords that have more than 20 units. And their answer was that their tenants, as long as they meet the 50% or less of the area median income rule, would still be eligible as long as the building itself has fewer than 20 units. So this means that if you're a landlord and let's say you have 100 units, but they're spread across 10 different buildings, each of those buildings containing less than 20 units, you and your tenants would still be eligible for priority in the first 30 days. So the fact that you have more units as a landlord does not disqualify you from receiving priority as long as the building for which the applicant is applying does not contain more than 20 units. In terms of other useful information that is provided on the state's website, the state was nice enough to provide tables for who meets the 80% area median income and who meets the 50% area median income. And so if you're on the website and you're in the eligibility section, you can simply click on the hyperlink and it will take you to the table. So here you can see, if we take Albany County, for example, you can see the different dollar values based on family size. So if there is one person, then 80% of the area median income would be $53,550. If there are two people, it'll be $61,200, three people, $68,850, and so on. And it's the same story with the 50% of the area median income table. So if you scroll down, you can just click on that table and you'll see the difference in the same county. If we're looking at Albany County, one person in the family would have to show that their income is at $33,500 or below. Two people, it'll be $38,250 or below, and so forth. This is useful information to know because now you can go and talk to your tenants and ask them whether or not they met these thresholds. And then you will know whether or not they will be eligible either for priority, which would be the 50%, or if they're eligible at all, even after the priority period ends, which is they had to have made 80% or less. In terms of benefits, nothing has changed here. Again, it's a maximum of 12 months of rent arrears that you may be able to get, which it's still uncertain whether they're going to provide full 12 months. It may be that they will start rationing this out and people will get less than that, but we will see what happens with that. You can get up to 3 months of additional rental assistance in the future. However, you have to show that the household is spending at least 30% of their gross monthly income to pay for rent. That may or may not be the case for a lot of families out there. If they qualify, maybe they can get an additional 3 months in addition to the 12 months of the arrears. But I wouldn't necessarily count on it because I expect this funding to go very quickly. In terms of the application process and how to apply, this is where we have some more disappointing news for landlords. Previously, based on what the state statute said, I thought that there may be a possibility that a landlord could fill out an application completely without much involvement from the tenant, except for the tenant's signature. Now we know that this is not the case and that the tenant has to be significantly involved in the application process in order to complete an application. The information that a tenant will be required to provide includes personal identification, which means a photo ID or a driver's license or non-driver government issued ID, potentially a insurance benefits card, birth or baptismal certificate, school registration, and so forth. The requirement is that every person who's claimed to be part of the household is supposed to provide some form of identification. Additionally, every single person in the household will be required to provide a social security number, and the tenant will be required to show proof of rental amount. Now, this should be fairly simple as long as they have a copy of their lease. It doesn't really matter whether the lease has expired or it's still current. As long as they have a copy and they can provide it to the state, then they will meet this requirement. As a landlord, you can help them meet this requirement by making sure that they have a copy of your lease. The biggest issue, I think, is going to be providing proof of income eligibility. Now, there are two ways that the state's website says the tenants can meet this requirement. They can either provide documentation showing their monthly income based on the most recent month, or they can demonstrate it by providing documentation showing their annual income from 2020. Monthly income can be shown by using documents such as pay stubs, bank account deposit verification, unemployment benefits, or other proof. With regard to documents showing annual income from 2020, obviously things like W-2s, completed tax returns, and income statements would be sufficient. It does say that the state will accept other evidence of 2020 annual income, but it doesn't specify what other evidence that would be, and we'll have to just wait and see how the state will administer it. In addition to providing documents, tenants will also be required to attest to the fact that they are eligible, that they suffered a financial hardship as a result of the pandemic, and landlords will also need to provide substantial amount of documentation in order to complete the application. So landlords will need to provide a copy of the W-9 tax form. They'll also need to provide an executed lease with the tenant, documentation of rent due from the tenant showing how much is owed, and finally, banking information so that they can receive their direct deposit. Landlords will be able to initiate the application, but they will not be able to complete it without their tenants. So according to OTDA staff from a webinar from last week, either landlords or tenants can initiate the application, and then the other party would be notified either by text or by email that they need to log on and complete it. And in either scenario, both parties will still need to submit substantial documentation in order to complete the application. Obviously, this is bad news for landlords who have uncooperative tenants who simply don't care about submitting an application and don't care about their landlord receiving any of the back rent. Now that the state has passed an additional eviction moratorium extension through the end of August, those tenants can essentially live in the property rent-free until September 1st. The last thing on the state's website that I want to point out real quick is the fact that landlords are waiving certain rights by agreeing to receive this funding. I talked about it extensively in my other videos. So again, I won't get into it in too much detail, but essentially you're saying that you're forgiving penalties, that you're not going to be evicting the tenant for anything other than non-payment of rent for a year, and that you won't be raising rent on your tenants for at least a year after you receive the payment. Obviously, if the tenant voluntarily leaves, that's a different story, but essentially you won't be able to evict them unless they fail to pay your future rent. There's also a pretty detailed frequently asked questions section, which you guys can check out on your own. There's not much there that I think is very new, but if you have any questions about anything, let me know in the comments. I'll try to elaborate on it. If I need to, I can make another video on this, but I think a lot of the answers to those questions are pretty self-explanatory. The last thing that I want to talk about is the issue of how long this is going to take. When I attended the webinar last week, there was an opportunity to put your questions in the chat box, and the presenters were supposed to respond to those questions during the presentation. So what I did is I asked them, how much staff does OTDA have in order to process these applications? And how long is it going to take to process 1 million or 2 million applications that are expected to come in? Of course, they didn't answer my question. They never got to it. And I think the reason is because they actually don't know how long this is going to take. So I just decided to do some calculations on my own to see what is a reasonable estimate for this application process to be completed. Let's assume that one reviewer can review one application every 5 minutes. Personally, I don't think that's possible. I think that because of the document requirements and the verification with regard to income requirements, I think it's going to take reviewers much longer than 5 minutes, but let's just assume that it takes 5 minutes for a reviewer to review an application. That means that this reviewer can review 12 applications per hour. If the reviewer works 7.5 hours per day, that reviewer can complete 90 applications in one day. If they work a 5-day work week, that means that they can review 450 applications per week. In a month, they'll be able to review 1,800 applications. Now, let's say that there are 100 reviewers. Each of them is able to review 1,800 applications in 1 month. Together, they'll be able to review 180,000 applications in 1 month. We're expected to have somewhere between 1 million and 2 million applications. So let's say it's 1.8 million applications that come in. How long does it take 100 reviewers who are reviewing 180,000 applications per month to review those applications and for those applicants to receive the funding? Well, with those numbers, it would take 10 months. And if you think that that's a crazy estimate, all you have to do is just look back in history to last year. Last year, the state of New York received $100 million from the CARES Act. It opened up its application portal in May of 2020. It closed it in August of 2020, and then it didn't begin distributing any of the funds until months later. In February of 2021, they were still processing applications from the previous year. This is 2 months after the new funding for the new emergency rental assistance was authorized by Congress. And that was just $100 million that was provided in the CARES Act. And it was only tens of thousands of applicants who applied for that funding. This time around, we have $2.4 billion in funding, and we have millions of applicants, not tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands, millions. Even if they have 1,000 reviewers or 10,000 reviewers working on this program, it's going to take many, many months for people to receive their funding. Primarily because I don't think it's going to take them 5 minutes to review one application. Unless they're just checking boxes and they're not actually reviewing anything, I think it's going to take them maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, or 2 hours. And obviously, there are going to be issues with the applications. You have two sets of people. You have a landlord and a tenant submitting different documentation and providing different information. Mistakes are going to happen all the time. There are going to be questions that reviewers are going to have. They're going to be going back and forth with their supervisors, maybe following up with the applicants, asking them to provide more information. I just see this being a complete disaster. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I am. I hope every single landlord receives all the background that they're owed, because it's been a really long time that landlords have been without income in many circumstances because tenants are simply unwilling to pay their rent because they know that there's no repercussions for them not paying it. So if you're a landlord, what can you do right now? Well, you should read the information on this website. You should go through it all thoroughly. Don't just rely on my video. Don't rely on my opinions. Go to the website. I'll put a link to it in the description below. Read every single question in the frequently asked questions section. Review all the sections in the main part of the website, and then talk to your tenants. There are 2 checklists on the OTDA's website, one for renters and one for landlords. Be sure to get a copy of the renter's version and provide it to your tenant. Go through it with them. Explain to them how this process is going to work. Explain to them about the income requirements and what income-related documentation they need to put together and have ready on hand so that they can provide it to OTDA so that OTDA can make a faster decision. By the same token, landlords should have their W-9s ready, should have their banking information ready, should have the information about what rent is owed, and should have a copy of their lease ready to go. That's pretty much all you can do right now. We're hoping that the state will open its portal very soon, but it hasn't given us a date, and we're pretty much still in a holding pattern. Unless you're one of the lucky few who are in those 7 local government jurisdictions, you're going to have to wait for the state. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, if you got value from it, do me a favor and hit the like button. And if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, definitely subscribe so that you don't miss any of my future content. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.